Okay, I think we're gonna call to order. Liz
Yes,
has the minutes,
I sent them out last
and
night.
everybody hopefully looked at these. Do we have a motion to approve them?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
All right, thank you. Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, we have to roll call, Patrick's there.
Okay, Patrick?
Oh, he's trying to connect to audio.
All right. I think we can still approve with the
Sure.
people.
Okay,
Hi, Michaela.
hi Jan. Hi Liz.
Aye, Randy.
Hi, Mark.
I think it passes. Karen, or Janet, would you like to introduce our guests? We're very happy to have you.
Yes,
And we will get underway because I think you have some things you need to do.
yes. Well, we were just gonna talk about go over once more the housing production plan. So introducing Karen Sonderberg. She is the consultant who is going to work with us on the housing production plan throughout the summer and into September. And has already started and has made great strides on a couple of fronts, which we're gonna talk about today. Right? And maybe I'll go over, unless you want to, the kind of steps once more of what's involved with the housing production plan process. We have, beginning with this, we had an introductory meeting about a month ago, which I reported on at the last meeting. Hello, Patrick.
Welcome, Patrick.
And the next steps are to go through a housing needs assessment, which is pulling together a lot of information, which Karen is already deep into, and may want to say a couple of things about that. But that would look at housing needs in Stockbridge for affordable housing, senior housing, maybe disability housing, workforce housing, and so on. And so hopefully we will be ready to have a conversation about the housing needs assessment at our June meeting, which I think is scheduled for the 24th. Randy, is that what we're talking about, June 24th?
That's a Saturday.
I think it was,
Oh,
I have the 19th.
the 19th, sorry.
Okay.
June 19th, Monday. So that's the first part of this. Then the second part is really developing the housing production plan itself, and there are multiple parts of that. One of those things is to develop a community survey, which is what we're going to talk about today. It's really to be sent out to the entire community as best we can, and get as many responses as we can about that. In addition to the housing community survey, we also want to be conducting interviews and of key people in town and elsewhere if need be. So one of the things, and we really need to be doing that during the month of June so that we get input back so that it can be used to help us figure out what a housing plan might look like. So one of the things that I think is very important is for each of you to kind of send to me and to Karen and to Michaela your suggestions about who we should be interviewing during that process. So the idea would be to interview kind of key people in various committees or boards in town, particularly anyone who is very interested in the housing issue or very knowledgeable about housing and what might be possible or not possible. So we need to, if we could, I think by next Friday, have all of your suggestions, then we can try to put together a kind of interview schedule and get those set up.
Is this just for boards and committees or for public at large?
I think it could be other people in the community who are interested in housing or who have something, a knowledge base that would be helpful in this whole process. Obviously, we can't interview, lots and lots of people, but
Yeah. How many interviews would you think could be conducted in this part of the process?
Well, you might have a thought.
Well,
certainly we want to touch base. I'll call the director of the Council on Aging. That's a kind of an important contact to get information on the needs. In the trenches that are hearing the inquiry. It's the same thing with the Housing Authority. Those are two very important
I think that's
pieces.
Roz, isn't that Patrick? Is it Roz McCaffrey? Roxanne, excuse me, the director of the aging.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be in touch.
Yes, Council on Aging.
Yeah, with them shortly. And then, Patrick wants to meet with me. I'm talking to Phyllis on Wednesday. We're tracking you down.
Yes, it's
It'd be very nice to offer. I think, let's be reasonable. Let's say no more than a dozen. But, folks that you really think will be important to bring into the process early in the process. And, really value added. Politically and substantively.
And you think 12?
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable number. If there's somebody really important and it's over that, that's fine. If it's like a real stretch to get to 12, I don't think we get to sweat that. So it's just kind of a number that's.
Oh, I think the question is a lot more.
There's
a lot more.
Well, it doesn't make sense for me to interview every representative of like the planning board or the select board or something like that. But I really rely on you. If it's more and it's important, we'll do it.
And there may be some that one or two of us might be able to interview in addition to the ones you have.
Yeah. And let me add that an important milestone in the process will be a community housing workshop where we hope to bring people together. I'll do a presentation of the key takeaways from the housing needs assessment and hopefully break into small group discussions with an agenda. And that's where a lot of people, besides the survey, besides the interviews, can have really be engaged in the process and have a voice in the housing plan.
And we probably, in terms of timing for that, Karen, I would think we'd want to do that after the needs assessment, obviously, because we want to have a presentation of what those are.
We're close on that.
And also after we do some of the interviews.
Yeah.
So we're probably thinking about timeframe of mid-July.
That's
Something like that.
reasonable. Sometimes it's hard to do stuff in the summer.
Yeah.
But given where we started, that's probably the logical thing. If you're gonna finish by September, we need to kind of move it along.
Randy, can I jump in here for a moment?
Oh, please.
So I was reading the article this morning about Mr. Sheehan and DeSisto. I don't know whether having interviewing Mr. Sheehan might be a worthwhile thing to see what, if anything, he can do as he's trying to move forward on his new plan, because the 40 properties, the 40 homes that he's proposing to build on the site at upwards of $900,000 certainly isn't something that could fit into the realm of the individuals that the Affordable Housing Trust is looking to address. And so I don't know whether there's any opportunities interviewing him to see what he can do as part and parcel of his housing project on that site at this point in time, but it might be interesting to have some input from him.
Patrick?
Hi, like I said, the subdivision in Stockbridge is by right or as of right. And back when there was a special permit on the table because of the hotel, it's my understanding, I was on the board then, that he was hesitant on the affordable housing side, with a by right development and anywhere from, I believe the subdivision he's filed is only for 7, but with a large parcel in the back that could be further subdivided. And my sense is that he'll likely want to build multi-million-dollar houses there. And with houses running $500 or $600 a square foot, my guess is 900,000 is below what it will even cost to build a 2,000 square foot house, let alone a 4,000 square foot. Those are probably more like $2 to $4 million housing sites, not 900,000. Which isn't bad. It's just, is what it is. So I think it's a good idea, though. I think that you never know. You can't. They say in sales, if you don't ask, you don't close. So I think asking him is a great idea, but we should keep our expectations realistic.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, and and I know he's in it to obviously make money, but he might have a magnanimous side to him, and he might be willing to carve out a portion of it to help address some of the issues around affordable housing. If he's really looking at 40 properties and all but 7 of them are going to be in the $2 to $4 million range, to carve out a parcel and give the Affordable Housing Trust some segment of it for people that that really could need it and can't afford those properties, might be worthwhile. So I just thought it would be interesting to include him in any kind of survey or discussions that we have, or that the committee has, to see what, if any, interest it might be.
Patrick, I have a question for you. Does the residential inclusionary bylaw have anything to do with this, or because it's a right and it's a subdivision, it doesn't?
That bylaw only applies to special permits. So if he was back on the drawing board to build a hotel, it would, but in this case, because it is as of right, it does not.
Okay.
Was there a reason you did it that way, Patrick?
There was some discussion about trying to make, look at, even because the initial subdivision is 7, it wouldn't even qualify because the 7th parcel is 270 acres. So in other words, by doing subdivisions, serially, as most developers do it was explained to me anyway that it didn't make much sense. It made much more sense for a larger, more discrete development that was, envisioned to include, some aspects of it that would need a special permit. Really, the only path to a special permit in town is the cottage area bylaw, and we don't have many undeveloped cottage area estates left here. So, this one takes one off the table, but, if you look at the mansion, it's not surprising.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you, Bruce.
Are we talking about the survey yet, or just in general?
We're just in general at the moment. We're about to get to the survey.
Okay. And I think just generally that we want to kind of affordable and affordability, I think are two different things, but it's confusing because affordable housing is specifically subsidized housing. And I think that our task here is to really think through as much the affordability issues around all sorts of housing, including unsubsidized, owner-occupied housing. And so, I think this is just a matter of, language, but not substance, but language is substance. But, I think kind of figuring out how we talk about both subsidized housing and either workforce housing or, owner-occupied unsubsidized housing. I don't know what the right phrasing is, but I think it's easy to get a little confused as we kind of, when people hear affordable housing, they think of something specific,
I think we can deal with some of those definitions when we do that PowerPoint presentation and the community housing workshop. And I plan on having that draft presentation to offer at the next housing trust meeting, so we can, get into some of that language.
Good.
Would you say that, Karen, that the goal of the first go around, where this, not the survey so much as the interviews, is to introduce the concept, and I'm not gonna use the word affordable, but more diverse housing in our community. Because one of the things that we hear by rumor will be interesting, because I think doing this work, your work, will bring it out on the table. Those people who think we don't wanna, if it ain't broke, don't change it, which
Right.
is a famous line around here. That we will get some a lot of negative information or negative responses. And one of the questions is what affordable housing really is. And if you use that word, affordable housing is housing that's subsidized by the government, as opposed to housing.
Not necessarily. I mean, for example, 40B relies on internal subsidies, it relies on density as actually a subsidy, whereas the market rate units can cross-subsidize the affordable ones. Those units are still called affordable. I think it's how you define affordability and how you think about it. It's not necessarily that it is directly subsidized by the government. It's, who's the target to be living there, and
That's interesting, because we've had some presentations from people in the industry who've told us that the word affordable, at least is my understanding, means that it's government subsidized.
There are consultants who really stick to that, and I just disagree with that. I mean, I really don't think that, I think affordable housing is, I'm going into that. I mean, the government calls affordable housing, if you're spending less than 30% of your income in housing, you're typically living in housing that is affordable. To be included on the subsidized housing inventory, then it has to meet a whole bunch of different requirements. And it's not necessarily that they're subsidized. They can be approved by a subsidizing agency. I think there is a broader definition of affordability and targets and ranges of affordability. And I think some of the data that we're analyzing in the housing needs assessment is going to speak directly to those issues, I think, which will be helpful.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah.
I think that locally, there's a pretty narrow view of what affordable housing is.
Yeah. But it sounds to me like we need to define what that is for people.
Yeah, I think
Right?
that's
That being part of this process.
one of the great, benefits of going through a planning process is the whole community education process. And providing information on the needs, benefits, models that work in other places, models that have worked here potentially, and to really discuss, the various definitions of affordability and how we're going to be tackling it. Through the housing production plan, you're looking at those SHI units. And so the units have to meet various requirements.
What does that mean?
So the subsidized housing inventory is those units that the state counts towards that 10% affordability threshold, which is you surpass. In order for a unit to count, it has to meet a number of very specific requirements. So because this is a production plan, we have to kind of, for 5 years on a calendar basis, kind of scope out how the town's going to get to its 0.5% of its year-round housing stock, which is about 4 units per year. But those are SHI units. Those are units that will meet that state definition of affordability.
Wait a minute, we already meet
Yeah.
the 10%, right?
Yeah. But still in the housing production plan, we need to kind of provide for each 5 years, how the town might, through its strategies, based on identified local needs, will produce units. This is a housing production plan, so the state is really looking at production as part of the package.
Patrick?
But I also think this, what we discussed about what we want out of this process is not just thinking about housing for others in town, but I would like to know how much challenges the folks are having maintaining the house they have. So for example, we're we're part of the Community Development Block Grant Program, where we maybe have room for 5 or 6 folks who are owner-occupied houses, but if they meet certain income thresholds, can get some renovations, new siding or paint or, new roof or whatever. I would like to understand, I thought that the introduction of the survey, for example, lays out some really interesting statistics on all of this. It'd be great to understand what the specific affordability issues are for actually the folks who own homes here. So for example, if we pass an ADU bylaw, can you afford to put one in? Would you consider putting one in? If you put one in, would you want to rent your house out or would you use it for a caregiver? I really would love to expand upon sort of what we're talking about, not just about sort of, what we might do theoretically to expand our inventory of housing, but also how we assess the needs of the people who are going to be taking the survey.
That's very important because, the housing needs assessment is going to document certainly wider housing needs within the community. And we don't, the housing production plans typically look at units that are targeted to those earning at or below 80% of area median income. CPA can cover people up to 100% of area median income. And with different tiers in a particular project, you can kind of have mixed incomes. And we can look at, specific strategies that are going to address some of the issues that you are raising. So even if an ADU doesn't count as part of the SHI, it could be important to a particular niche of homeowners and potential renters in the community. And we have to really make the case for that.
Yeah, right.
I think Patrick's right that in addition to creating housing that people can afford to move into, doing something and what do we need, what would we or what would the committee need to do in order to help people that are already in their housing afford to stay there. That obviously is another, I think, another aspect of the issues that Affordable Housing Trust needs to be thinking about.
Absolutely.
And one of the things, to echo what Bruce is saying, one of the things that came up when we were talking about the ADUs that frankly I hadn't thought of was the my concern was around not sort of creating 2 rental units, if you want, for market rents in the summer around short-term rentals and stuff, in terms of like limiting the scope of the ADU bylaw that we're talking about. But some folks like Joe and Bruce pointed out that it's possible if we can structure an ADU as a long-term rental that folks might want to be part of that solution. So really getting into, the very, very practical thing that we were talking about over the next 6 months is ADUs and short-term rentals. Do nothing, do something. If so, what is the something defined as? And really kind of thinking through how all of that plays into the larger question of affordability and not the narrow question of affordable, I think is really important.
That's a really good point because we want to talk about the nuances of some of these various approaches, at the same time stick to kind of the general kind of holistic orientation towards resolving some unmet housing needs within the community. So just on the rentals aspect of ADUs, I'm working with one town and one of the members of the Board of Selectmen who teaches at a private school is living in a house and they're selling the house and he has to go and he has no place to go in the community to live. And he has to live in the community, member of the select board. Right. It's those kinds of things that are happening all around.
It's happening here.
Yeah.
And you're familiar with the fact that, like, because of our census population, it's a subset of our total number of housing units, that we're not at any risk of losing our 10% threshold.
Yeah, you've got a big cushion.
Well, we have a big cushion, and it's getting bigger by the year because obviously, based on the 2010 census, I think it was 1,038 units qualified for census in that 10% threshold. And my guess is the next time they count will be somewhere in the realm of 800 to 900. So,
No,
you know,
I've done those calculations, and you went from 10% some odd change to 13.5%, so, yeah.
so we're
you
doing
probably-
this because we want to, not because, you know, we're worried about, you know, that was the point I was making. You know, yeah.
I think we want to make the case, despite surpassing the 10% affordability goal, you've got a whole heap of unmet housing needs. Given the
Yeah.
rise in housing prices, and in fact, the median household income has declined.
Yeah,
Our median.
I know, you're right.
Staggeringly low.
$46,000, something.
Karen, could I just ask you, did you get, the 20 census numbers? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm using mostly the 2021 census estimates, but when the 2020 census figures are available, the decennial, they're fairly limited. The Census Bureau, as far as actual counts, doesn't count much, but I would certainly have the 2020 decennial figures in there. But most of the data comes from census, at least. I mean, there's lots of other sources, comes from the 2021 American Community Survey estimates.
And do you know what that actual number is now?
Of what?
Of the base number off which we're evaluated for the inventory? Is it, in other words, it used to be what, Patrick?
Yeah, I have it.
1038, yeah.
I have, where is it? Here we go. I'll give you exactly what it is.
Now, are these only for occupied, like, full-time residents, does not count for?
Only full-time residents. So in 2010 census, there was a total of, the year one housing stock was 1,051 units. And that meant that your 113 SHI units is equivalent of 10.75% of your year-round housing stock. Based on the decennial 2020 housing total count, you have 1,633 units. Take out 767, which are the seasonal, occasional, second home units. You end up with a year-round housing count of 866 units. That's down from 1,015. And therefore, because your year-round housing stock has gotten lower and your SHI count is the same, you got a big boost on the percentage to 13.05%. I mean, part of the, dismay is that your year-round housing stock is eroding fairly significantly.
Do you assume that means that second homeowners have bought those and then
Yeah, they converted.
full-timers have left?
Yeah,
It's not just second homeowners, there's about 130 dedicated short-term rental units here. So, I think that
mean
it's
that
at
they are
least
not
as many.
second homeowners. That also does
What?
not mean, short-term rental does not necessarily mean those people are not using that home if they own it. They can use that home and rent it when they're not using it.
that's right.
And also, I just think that going forward in this, we have to be thoughtful about I think it's much more nuanced, and it makes me a little frustrated when we talk about short-term rental, because it's one of those things we have to be careful that this is a tourist community. There are people like us who live here full-time, but we don't have another overriding industry that can make up for the loss of revenue and the loss of taxes in that. So we have to be thoughtful about not alienating short-term rental owners, because they are extremely important to the vitality of the community. And if we limit it to such a degree, they will just go to Lenox, they will just go to Great Barrington, they will just go to Lee, and it will really hurt the local businesses that we do have left here. So I just say that, I think it's an easy blame, and I think it's much more nuanced than that, and we should use it to our advantage.
Yeah.
How do we use short-term rental to our advantage to then create funds that allow for affordable housing to be constructed or restructured or fixed? So I think we just need to think about it as not necessarily an enemy, but as something that we should.
The point I was making, Michaela, was about dedicated investors. We have a couple in my neighborhood. There's some that are not sort of hybrid, where people are, like renting their house out in the summer and going away or whatever. I'm talking about dedicated investors.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's fair. I just think there's a difference between like someone who owns a home and rents it out versus BlackRock. You know what I mean? Which is a whole
Yeah, of
different
course.
kind of game.
Exactly, we're saying the
It's
same
hard
thing.
to decipher who is BlackRock investing, where are they investing versus who just owns one house, you know, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just wanted to throw that in there.
So if we could, I think we should move to have discussion of the survey because
That's right.
Karen has to leave at 6. And you have to leave at 10 of 6, so let's get on it.
It's my son's birthday.
Oh,
Okay,
well, that's a
Okay,
good
so-
start.
All right, so I'm sorry you don't have a copy, Patrick. We sent one. There have been a couple minor changes, but
I have the one in front of me that you can just
Okay.
share.
good, okay. So there are a couple of things in here I wanted to, first is the timing. What I was thinking we would do is send it out right after Memorial Day weekend, so in a week and a half. And we could ask for the date back being early in July. I have in this draft July 14th, but I think it would be okay to make it the 11th, maybe the
Yeah.
Friday right after the 4th of July weekend. I think it's important to have it go into July a little bit because some of the people who are second homeowners, if you will, and related to, involved with the Boston Symphony and elsewhere may not be up here until sometime in June. So that's why the timing.
Gina, what is the method of distribution?
So I spoke to Michael about that and how we would do that. He said he was going to talk with you, Patrick, but because one of the issues is we don't have email addresses for everybody in town. So it would be difficult to use SurveyMonkey or, Google Forms to do the survey that way. What Michael was suggesting is that we might create a fillable PDF that we would have be a link that on the town website that people could go and click and then fill it in online and return it. It would go back to a town site
Right.
that Karen would have access to. So
My
because she,
suggestion would be that we do a postcard actually that would have a tiny URL or something to access the survey. And that way we could put it in every mailbox plus all of the Lennox and West Stockbridge, RFP, kind of the rural delivery provided by Lennox and West Stockbridge, and a little bit of Great Barrington to homes in Stockbridge. So, we do have a fair amount of cushion in what we budget in this project versus, what we're spending on consulting, and we can use that money for production and mailing of this sort of thing. So I'm kind of thinking we hit every box, and you're right, the boxes are going to be actually used. People will be checking the boxes in the summer, whether they're primary or secondary homeowners. So
Patrick, are you thinking on that we would use the addresses that let's say the assessor has for tax purposes so that, for example, second homeowners would be, might have an address in Boston.
yeah, I mean, I think that I was thinking that we do that only if they don't have a PO box in Glendale or Stockbridge, because those are all at the main post office. So you do what's called every door direct mail, which basically is a saturation of every box within a zip code. And then the outliers who might, somebody who gets mail delivered from Lennox like me or West Stockbridge, like on 183, we would actually do a physical mail to that address because they have, so I'm not really thinking about the assessor's address. I'm thinking about basically what's called a saturation mail, where you're mailing to all the addresses that are in a specific area. In this case, it'd be all the PO boxes plus all the 01240, 01266, and 01230. I can kind of give that to you offline if you want.
Okay, that would be helpful.
The other thing is that you do want to get the renters to respond too. So there's going to be, besides just sending information on the survey to owners, it should be an attempt to try to get some of the renters to respond.
I think every address. If they're most people in town are one of the 1,100 mailboxes.
Okay.
Then about 150 or so get delivery from a surrounding town because they live in the outskirts.
We don't have to.
Yeah, we don't have mail
Okay,
delivery for
okay.
most of Stockbridge.
Never mind.
And I had, is it possible for, Mike does those announcements on the phone. Would it be possible to just put one out there that called everybody in town that says, don't forget to fill out your survey by July 11th?
Yeah, we kind of held off on using the emergency broadcast for anything other than kind of, there's been some resistance to doing that in town. We can check.
Okay, because that would reach everybody.
Right. If once you start doing that, they kind of feel like you're just giving them a robocall and not actually letting them know there's something they really need to know. I love the idea though, But.
The other thing that Michael suggested was that we might put a notice in Berkshire Eagle, and there might be a couple of other places. We could also send out a notice through Stockbridge Updates.
Yes.
That the survey is available.
Yeah.
And
Carol.
there's also this, I'm not familiar with it, but the second homeowners listserv that Patty Kaya does, so I could be in touch with her and see if we could send notice out on that as well.
And I think each of
And the
the,
Council on Aging, obviously, sorry.
Go ahead,
I
Bruce.
think each of the communities, I think has the homeowners within their community, Beechwood and Mackinac Shores and Mackinac. So utilizing whoever is managing that listserv for their respective another way of getting it out. And then we could see, another suggestion might be to see about whether any of the like Nijems and the like would be willing to let us put a notice on their door or somewhere within their facility to basically say, please don't forget to.
Yeah.
I think we'd also want to have some hard copy of the survey in town hall somewhere.
Yes.
Either the town administrator or office or the town clerk. What would be your suggestion, Patrick?
Yeah, I think all of it's great at the library and the rest of it. I think we're trying to get as many as we can.
Transfer
I don't
station.
recommend that we use a fillable PDF though, because we don't have any technology in town to scrape the data that's filled. We're going to really need to have this be a link to SurveyMonkey or one of the other platforms where we can basically, aggregate the data and answers in an automated fashion. We don't have anybody who's going to be able to take 500 surveys and manually kind of get the data out of a fillable PDF.
If there are people though who don't have computer access, who feel uncomfortable, dealing with something online, having hard copies, I don't think there'd be many of them, and I'm happy to scrape the data from them.
Yeah, I think that should be the exception rather than the rule, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So Patrick,
We'll also put a notice up at the transfer station.
Yep.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So Patrick, you're saying that what we should do is have this link go out, which would have the survey in it. But then when someone fills it in, they would need to include their email address.
No, or they would or as it comes in, like if someone fills out a hard copy, someone's going to need to code that into SurveyMonkey, fill out the form on the user's behalf and mark it entered.
Okay.
All
Well, SurveyMonkey
Can do that.
can do that.
Okay.
there's other platforms. That's all one on top of my head.
They're all.
The other thing, Janet, is that Clarence Fanto, so what we should get him to do is an article about our doing this survey and interview Karen. I'm sure he would do that, don't you think, Patrick?
No, I don't know. We're one of 32 towns in the Berkshires. Hopefully, it'd be great if you would, but I think that I think we got a lot of strategies to distribute it, and we should avail ourselves of the hyper local ones. But we'd send the press release to Clarence, or I'll call Clarence if you want. You can call, and we'll see. I think it's it may not be. There's only 2 pages of local news in the Eagle each day. I'm not sure we'll get 6 inches or column inches.
It seems like they don't have as many things to write about these days. But anyway, the Edge also, I'm sure we could get something. But if we could get a big article, because that great article they had about Jane Iredale Friday, the turnout was fabulous, absolutely fabulous, just from that one article. Nobody knew that they were even having that event, and there were 200 or 300 people there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Okay, so coming back to the survey, are there any other corrections, changes?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we need a whole set of questions around people's individual experiences about not what do they think about building versus, you know, scatter versus whatever, about how their ability to afford their home and the issues they're dealing with, if any. Their desire to downsize on property, downsize off property, you know, their desire to, you know, have a caregiver versus have a rental unit, their need for a rental unit in terms of augmenting their income. I mean, I think that really trying to get to the heart of some of these questions around this community, whether it's full-time or part-time residents. I mean, you know, I think I would love to kind of get a sense of what people are looking at from the town around these issues for themselves individually, not just for what's best for the community.
Okay, some of those questions, Patrick, will duplicate the resilience thing, which went out mainly.
I know.
Okay, so we can add those back in,
Yeah.
okay? We'll do. Any other comments, corrections?
Under number 2, the ability to, I would add another box, the ability to staff volunteers for the fire department and or town boards and committees.
We do have the second lack volunteers for critical services. So you could add committees to that parentheses.
Basically, it's like kind of like, you know, sort of the roles that, you know, we need folks to play in the long term.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you're suggesting, Patrick, we expand?
Add town committees to the EMT fire.
yeah.
Yeah.
And are there any, if we look at question 5, the best locations for housing development, do any of you have other ones you want to add to this?
But, I mean, what do you think is the relevance of that question altogether? Especially if we're adding some of the others back in. The best location for senior housing is, of course, close to downtown, you know, and, you know, I mean, I don't, I'm just not sure that, there's so little land in Stockbridge that is really going to qualify for any kind of effort. You basically have one-off parcels or tax lien parcels via you know Habitat for Humanity. Then you've got expanding Pine Woods and or Heaton Court. Then you've got a new development somewhere, and the new development parcels we have, I can count on less than half of one hand. There's just not much relevant land here. I think we maybe know the answer to that, but I mean, if you want to ask people's opinion anyway, that's fine. But it's
Yeah, it's
Okay,
Do most people understand the phrase scattered site development? Is that something that's readily understood by the general public?
I mean, maybe that question isn't needed.
full question.
Maybe.
Scattered site development.
I mean, he is right there, so it's.
You know, scattered site means that you're, maybe we should add something in an existing neighborhood so that you are developing projects in not like one large particular project, more kind of an infill basis in various neighborhoods instead of targeting a large project in a specific one. But
Individual
maybe it's.
projects within existing neighborhoods?
Yeah.
Okay, we can change it.
Sometimes I add infill. That's also, not everybody understands what infill is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? So we'll make those changes. Do we need to run it back to the whole committee? Or
Thanks, Nikki.
Or can you empower Karen and me and Michaela to make the final?
Yes, I'm for
Oh, sure.
empowerment.
Would you just mind sending me a copy of the draft final?
Absolutely, Patrick.
All right,
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Are there any other questions that we want to focus on?
Do you want to say that workforce housing means Stockbridge, or do you want to say Stockbridge and surrounding towns are regional? Under number 6. The 6th or 7th box, those employed in Stockbridge workforce housing. But there's just, I think workforce housing is basically people who work in the community, not so much, we don't have many businesses in Stockbridge. We have almost no industrial businesses, and we have some Main Street businesses, but I don't think of the workforce housing as being limited to just people who work in Stockbridge.
That's a good point.
Okay. So we'll just make that workforce housing.
Yeah.
What, number 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Randy and I were talking about that as well, that there may be opportunities in some of the surrounding towns to facilitate some of the workforce housing, particularly in season.
Yeah.
When the numbers, the necessary numbers go up.
And there might be really some good thoughts about working more regionally, locally, with neighboring communities. There are lots of good precedents for that, for example, in the Cape. And that might be worthy of discussing.
But we have similar problems to the Cape.
You do, you very much do,
In that,
yes.
in that, we are really a, well, tourist, I think, but Red Lion Inn, terrible problem. All the cultural institutions have to support all of the people who perform here, all summer. So, and I've talked to several of them and it's pretty extraordinary. A lot of people move out of their homes to provide housing.
Same as the Cape.
Okay, so we will move along, and at our next meeting, we'll have a presentation of the housing needs assessment and all of that data.
Yeah, and we could talk a little bit more also about the community housing workshop and, the agenda for that and breakout groups.
When do you think that's going to be, the workshop?
We're talking about it sometime early in July, something like that.
Really, that being that, I'm not too keen on the July 7th or whatever, that week. I think people, the week of 4th of July, when they fall in the middle, the
Yeah.
whole week is shot.
Yeah.
And you really,
Yeah.
people,
So is the workshop before the due date of the survey? Or is the workshop?
Which is it better to do?
Well, ideally, it'd be nice to be able to provide some information to the participants about the results of the survey. I think it's, how quickly we can kind of pull those together. If it's going to be, really delay the workshop, then we probably should just go ahead and schedule it. But it would be nice to just provide some kind of maybe feedback on the survey, if we could, if time allowed.
If we have everybody fill it out by July 11th, how much time do you need to pull that survey together afterwards? So then we can plan the workshop when you have the time.
Well, most of the responses will be computed by the software, but the open-ended ones can take some real time. I'm gonna be gone mid-July, so.
it's going to be for the rest of the summer.
Oh, no, just for a week.
I see.
A very exciting trip to visit my aunt and uncle in their 90s in Duluth, Minnesota. So, envy me, right?
Well, at least it'll be warm. I can do it.
That's right.
So maybe we could do that community workshop last week in July, when you're back.
Or first week of August.
Yeah, maybe we could do that. It just does make the September deadline challenging, because then we have to, put together the housing strategies and the goals and kind of finish the draft document,
Is there anything sacred about that, about September?
It was in your RFQ.
Yeah, right, it's RFQ.
If there was a little bit of wiggle room, probably
I
would make.
mean,
I think
don't you feel we're anything but flexible in this?
there's nothing, is there anything that would come out of this that might be a subject for the town meeting? When is the town meeting?
Is it gonna
Sometime in
be?
September and October, we're gonna have a special town meeting that will deal with the merger of the school districts between South Berkshire and Berkshire Hills. It's conceivable that we could add other things to it, but I don't think there's gonna be time in this process to, for example, get back to drafting bylaws. I think we have to finish this process and come up with some recommendations, and then there's a whole nother project that's gonna be getting back based on this to draft bylaws. So I wouldn't worry about the fall town meeting. It's pretty much just for the school. We have till next May to finish this, and if we think something comes out of it that involves drafting a bylaw, have time to draft bylaws.
Yeah, that works, sounds good.
So I think we're thinking more like late fall or something to have it.
Yeah.
But
So that it's not
it's not so
critical that it be at the end of September.
That's great, because a lot of times these the public process is very important, and obviously, and you guys are great at it, so we can not jam up these workshops and throw together a draft, but be very purposeful and about what we.
How many public meetings do you permit in this?
Two. One is that workshop after the needs assessment, where people are really providing input on the questions in the survey, basically some of the same questions, but we really want to get at kind of priority actions. And then I'll draft the remaining sections and work with you guys, and then we'll have another community forum to present the draft plan and get input. Yeah.
So that would maybe be October or something?
Yeah, that would be great.
The only thing I would suggest is, look, I think one of the criticisms I think was valid, it was not intended, but was nevertheless valid, is at least, and in all likelihood more than half of the town is mostly seasonal residents. And I would like the outreach part of this to be front-loaded into the June, July, August, beginning of September timeframe, basically the Tanglewood season, because that's when we're going to get the most input from our seasonal neighbors. All right, so I don't really want to be doing like community meetings in November. I would really like us to get as diverse a population of input that we can, and let's start to try to make everyone feel more part of the community. If there's some of us were in a big hurry to get stuff done over the last year or two. I think we need to slow down a little bit and get it done the right way. And I think one of the things we got to do is make sure that everybody can participate. And they're much more likely to participate if we do it over the summer. I'm just talking about the community input part, not what it takes to pull the other parts together. So the survey, the meetings, whatever.
So you're asking for the workshop to be in the summer and then the community forum also in the summer, or?
Yeah, I really think we're better off if we do all the data input then, and then we can take our time analyzing it and, kind of writing a report and doing whatever. But, I say summer, I'm talking really about through mid-September.
I think the hard part, Patrick, will be having the plan done and then presenting it to the community. And have that all done before the end of August is probably unlikely.
No, I don't mean the presenting. The plan can be completed. I want the input part to happen during the summer.
Right.
Then writing the plan, analyze the data, doing the committee work is fine. That can go well into the fall.
Okay, that's, I think we're on the same page.
Karen has to go.
I'm sorry,
That's all right.
to be continued, yes.
So we'll see you at our next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a good day for you, the 19th?
Yeah, Jan checked with me and it's on my calendar.
Okay. Very
So that'll be good.
Well, we thank you very much.
Yes,
for all
Well, I'm delighted to be working with you, and so I look forward to the months ahead.
Yes, and so do we.
There you go.
Terrific. Okay.
Okay, your good guidance. Enjoy your dinner. Yes.
Enjoy, and I know, tell your son and wish him an
See you later. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you. We'll be talking to you. I know.
Okay.
Bye.
All right.
How do I get out?
Oh, this way.
All right. Do we have enough people? Yes, we do.
Yes.
We still have-
Bye.
We still have 5, so we're all right. Moving to the next one. I have never received a written letter from Don. Did you, Patrick? Did the town receive something from Don for his resignation?
I don't know, but he told me he had resigned. So I think that we should consider him resigned.
Okay, we don't need something written.
I don't know. I'm not, I think that for the purpose of this, did he tell you that as well?
What? Tell me?
He told you that as well, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, he told
Yeah,
me.
so let's consider him resigned.
Okay. The next, obviously, Bruce has expressed interest, and we appreciate your participating, Bruce, today, in filling that slot. So, but Patrick, you were underway, I think, to the select board is the one, we don't really have any input in that, as I understand it.
Look at that. A couple of years ago, we had 2 candidates for 1 seat on the Conservation Commission when I was still on it. And we accommodated both by making me sort of an ex officio member, and I resigned from the Conservation Commission, but I was still sort of the assigned person. This is before Jamie became the assigned person. So I think that we should reach back out to Renee Fids, who applied. Remember when we were in the first round? Bruce obviously would be great. If both of them want to do it, I'd be happy to just be kind of a non-voting liaison person. I don't need to actually be on it. I think we should try to involve as many voices in town government as we can. And I'd be happy to formally step up this one board, but still come to the meetings as sort of the select board representative, non-voting representative. So if Bruce wants to do it, and if we want to get somebody like Renee or a member of, Heen Court or something like that, Pinewood to participate, I think we have really at least 1 slot now, but possibly 2 if we need it.
All right, but Patrick, I believe in our charter, that someone from the select board is supposed to be actually on the board. Am I wrong?
I don't think that's true, is it?
Pardon?
I don't believe that's true. We
Okay,
can check.
my recollection was that someone from the select board, was supposed to be on it, but we should check into that. But what I, am very interested in, there's some very good people in town who who have some interest in, affordable housing and changing housing. And there are also some really other excellent people that we haven't reached out to. And I would like to consider setting up a group of people as an advisory board who we could go to and involve them from time to time, but they would not necessarily attend meetings, but they would agree to be resources to us. And I'm thinking there's half a dozen people in that category that I think if we ask them, might be willing to at least be aware of what we're doing. I have a couple of reasons for it, but I'd like to have them aware of what we're doing and be available to us as we have questions or ideas to see if they fly with that group. And I was thinking of a group of maybe 4 and 5, maybe.
Like an advisory board.
But I don't know why anybody wants to advise us can come to our meetings and talk with us. It's not like there's no hierarchy. I feel like an advisory board has a separate meeting. All of a sudden, it's an open public meeting. It has to be, once you formalize it, it's part of like the open meeting law, whatever. If there's a handful of people you want to get advice from, my suggestion would be get advice from them. And, get 2 of them. We have one on the call now who might actually want to serve. But it's up to you. Right? I'm not saying no. I'm just saying, I think we're the advisory board. But,
Well, I guess I see it slightly differently. I see us as the actors. And if we aren't the energy to make things happen, there isn't anybody. So my vision was more that we would develop sort of more and more networks out into the community who would be interested in what we're doing. Because I don't think, according to some people that I know, we haven't done a very good job of letting people know we're here and what we're thinking about.
up to you. I think we should maybe get through the housing production plan and then see if that problem takes care of itself. But look, I'm not gonna, whatever you want to do. I just understand though that if you name a formal committee, they'll have to follow the open meeting law, and then we're having two meetings, not one meeting, unless it's all going to be all of us together. You know.
There must be a way to ask these people without putting them on a committee.
Yeah, make it informal. Ask for their advice.
No, more, no, we don't need any more structure. We just need brains. No.
And Randy, if there's an issue with, you know, people in town not knowing what the trust is doing, there probably are other ways to make it known what the trust is doing, whether it's to have Carol, you know, put it on Stockbridge updates, or, you know, be more elaborate more in Stockbridge updates about what happens at the trust meetings and what the trust is doing. You know, rather than creating more complexity and layers of hierarchy or additional committees.
If there's anything I don't want to do is create more hierarchy. So, anyway, it's an idea, and to be discussed continually. We'll move right on to Patrick. Do you want to tell us quickly about the town meeting? And we all congratulate you on your overwhelming victory. So we're very proud of you, and congratulations. But can you fill us in just on the inclusionary bylaw that was passed and
yeah, so like I said earlier, it applies to special permits. So in Stockbridge, the only path for a special permit, I believe, is the Codger Estate bylaw. So if the Marians decide to sell Indian Hill, or, you know, Elm Court decides to develop, or, you know, any one of those Main Street properties has 80 acres, I don't think they do, then those are, and they want to develop something other than by right subdivision. So in other words, a commercial aspect, a non-residential aspect of the development, those are subject to special permits and would be subject to either including affordable housing or payment into the affordable housing trust. So it's a good thing. Yeah, we'll see what happens. And then the CBC money for the Pinewoods driveway passed, which is great news for Pinewoods. The money for Riverbrook passed, and the money for Heaton Court passed. So I think that's kind of a summary of town meeting. Yeah, I just think that Roxanne ran an excellent campaign, and I had a chance to spend about 12 hours with her that last Tuesday, and it was fantastic. It was like the old days, and we debated things we didn't agree on and agreed on most everything, because that's the way it always is. And I just want to give her kudos for you know, takes a lot to run. It's, you know, it's not easy.
all right, thank you, Patrick. Mark.
All right, well, Randy attended a meeting not too long ago, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture was represented there. And Randy got speaking with somebody from a regional official from the USDA about their rural development housing programs. And so I got in touch with the person that Randy had spoken to, and he suggested, he sent me a couple of links to some of their programs. I'm not sure how much of this is something we can sink our teeth into. The two things that this fellow sent me One dealt with something that a government institution such as ours could work with, and the other was more targeting individuals to try and get some USDA funding for home improvement or home production. The program for government and nonprofits provides grants to qualified organizations to help them carry out local self-help housing construction projects. But it's very limited in how the funds can be used. The funds can be used for technical and supervisory assistance to participating families. So if a household wants to try to develop something, a housing trust could provide some expertise. It could be an architect or an engineer or somebody to help somebody figure out what they want to develop. However, these funds cannot be used to hire people to perform construction work or to buy real estate or materials. Can't pay debts, expenses, or costs for the participants. So it seems pretty limited, as to what we could do with that one.
Would the money come to us or directly to?
Well, we would apply and we would get it, but it would have to be in conjunction with somebody trying to develop a house. And maybe I don't know if Habitat for Humanity would need any assistance from us. They know more about developing these houses than we do, than taking houses over and fixing them up. So I don't know, I may want to circle back with this guy and get some examples of how this program's been used, because it seems so limited that it didn't seem very useful.
Can we pass the money? So, for example, if we get $10,000 or something, could we give it to Habitat for Humanity to help them?
I'm not sure what our flexibility would be. I mean, they can apply as well, and maybe they have. Maybe they've used this, I don't know. First of all, as you pointed out, guess what? We are a rural community that qualifies for this.
Right.
So.
That I was very surprised about, that we're so small that we're rural.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's what Congress had in mind when they passed this, but here we are, we're rural.
right.
The other one is a direct program for homeowners or people that would be homeowners to apply for directly. And this is a self-help program for low and very low income applicants to buy decent, safe, sanitary housing in eligible rural areas, providing payment assistance to increase their ability to pay for the housing. But the applicants must be without decent, safe, and sanitary housing at the moment, unable to obtain a loan from the usual sources, agree to occupy the property as their principal residence, have legal capacity to incur loan obligations, meet citizenship and those requirements, and not be suspended or debarred from participation in federal programs. The house has to be modest in size, not designed for income producing activities. So an individual could apply for this if they were in some really very unfortunate setting at the moment and they wanted to buy or build a decent house. They could get some kind of a grant.
Does
You
it
have to be
say?
homeless?
Well, it said they have to be without decent, safe, and sanitary housing. I don't know how that's
So
defined.
basically, so someone who's homeless who wants to buy a house can apply? Okay, we don't have many homeless people there, but, I think it sounds kind of a, sort of a bizarre sort of combination of requirements.
Yeah. I mean, both of these were kind of disappointing when I dug into them a little bit. The guy did say that you had spoken to, if you look this stuff over and there's more, you want to discuss it more and more questions, I can get back to him. I can see if you can give me some examples
Mark?
of this has actually happened. Yeah.
Mark, for the first piece that you described, would something like hiring someone for technical support to see if there's a way to repurpose an existing vacant or no longer utilized entity, like a motel that's gone out of business from COVID or whatnot, to see how we could redesign it in a manner that might be applicable, particularly for some of the employee housing that we're trying to increase the opportunities for? Is that something that would
It
fit
looked like
within
it
these
might fit.
parameters?
You know, I'm gonna follow up with this guy and ask, because for example, there may be properties where we're looking at it and wondering, gee, could we do something with that? And we need some expertise to go in there and look at it, examine it, see whether it's feasible.
Right.
Do some engineering expertise and say, okay, yes, you could pursue this and it might work out in a way that we couldn't ourselves, fathom. So maybe it does apply to that if we have something in mind.
Does it have to be a single or can it be a multifamily?
It may not be used. It seems to be geared towards a family, but that doesn't necessarily sound like it would make sense. Let's see, grant
We don't have
recipients.
many multifamilies in town.
Yeah, well, this would grant recipients.
No, I'm thinking of us using it to get a project off the ground that would be multifamily.
Here, they're talking about you could grant recipients to supervise groups of very low income or low income individuals and families as they construct their own homes in rural areas. The group members provide most of the construction labor on each other's homes with technical assistance from the organization.
Who thinks these things up?
Like, where do they think the money's coming?
Move on and Mark
Randy.
and keep looking at it.
Randy, it's your government. We're here to help.
I know, this seems like, well, I mean, we don't live in the kind of environment that they're talking about. And there are rural communities in this country that have very, very
There
difficult
may even be
situation.
parts of Berkshire County and certainly upstate New York and places we've all driven through where there
Right.
might be more critical need for this.
Appalachia.
Yeah, it sounds like it's sort of geared towards that situation. But I'll have a better chat with the guy and see. We were just communicating via email. And I'll see if I can find out more.
There's also, when I talked to him, there are people, he covers 3 states.
There's Connecticut.
And there's somebody just for Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And that might be a better, have him,
I thought he was a state director, but I'll check it out.
is it
Who's that guy?
Stewart?
Stewart Soares.
No,
Oh.
he's the big cheese.
Oh, Scott Soares was the guy.
Yeah, he's had all 3.
Oh, he's a regional guy? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But he has 3 people under him.
Well, they're in Amherst. He said we could come talk to him if we wanted to. Maybe. But I'll follow up with him.
Okay.
But it's a little disappointing on this first examination.
All right. Jan,
So I think that program may be one of the ones that is also covered by Justice 40. So what I did was, as a beginning, to try to look at the Justice 40 programs that might affect housing in one form or another. I went on the site and I have a little, I'm sorry I can't send it to you, Patrick, but I'll email it to you. So this is from the government's website, which is up on top, and it basically identifies the 7 areas that this Justice 40 program is targeted to address. And as you can see, one of them is affordable and sustainable housing and training and workforce development, et cetera. Then I went through it, there's an exhaustive list of many, many departments in the government and the programs or areas in those departments that have programs under the Justice 40 funding. And I tried to go through and just as a first cut, look at any of the programs that might have something to do with housing, either in making it affordable by providing subsidies for energy or development of sewer and water, clean water and so on. So these are the ones that I could identify. They're basically in 4 departments of the government, the Department of Agriculture, and there it talks, Mark, about the rural housing service, but it says there are 6 different programs, so I don't know whether the person you were talking to would have jurisdiction over all 6 of those, or whether
Yeah.
it's just one, but there might be others that we want to look at. Then in HHS, there's the Administration for Children and Families. There are 3 different programs, including low-income home energy, which might apply to some of the senior folks here in, Stockbridge. There are community and rural development grants also. And then HUD also has 4 programs. And again, I didn't go into much detail on these, but I guess what I'm suggesting is that maybe we each sign up to do a little more homework on one of these areas so that we'll have more sense of whether there's anything there that might be of
I got the feeling as I looked through it that just the idea of generally getting funds with a concept in mind or a good purpose in mind is not the way this goes. You seem to have something in the works, having a specific targeted idea or project or home or whatever, as opposed to, we're an affordable housing trust, give us a few grand and we'll do something with it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you have a project in the works and you apply to something in the government, it could take 6 months for them to figure out what to do about it. So I don't know.
Jan, I would suggest you sit down with Michael, because as he was looking at that, there are certain areas where it looks like we are, where we qualify, and other areas where some other communities like Pittsfield qualified that we perhaps didn't. I'm not sure yet. But Michael seems to have a better idea of the areas we should focus on. And I would suggest you sit down with Michael and try to narrow what, based on the online tool. I guess it kind of tells you what areas that you might qualify for. I know we qualify in the area of energy. Maybe we could do, but then it's basically looking for grant opportunities that they have in that space that we would then feel we wanted to apply for. So, I would definitely talk to Michael, and then maybe we could pick this up at the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
Very good, thank you. Just to give you a little feedback, I had a call from Jackie McNish at Adams Bank. I don't know how many people know Jackie. She's pretty terrific. She's been on the trust in Lennox. And she just asked, she was doing a presentation at some sort of community program and wanted to talk about our down payment assistance. I'm sorry we lost Michaela, but we've talked about it. She wanted to know what we had offered and she wanted to include it in her presentation. So it brought to mind that we've left it on a floating table that's floating somewhere over the horizon. Whether we want to resurrect that and, whether we want to talk about it some more. Resurrect it wasn't alive ever. We felt that, I know when we discussed it, we felt that we didn't have enough people who were looking at properties that would qualify. But perhaps we should turn back against that, and I just wanted to bring that up again. Anybody have any thoughts?
Well, I don't know. Housing prices are so high. I don't know. It's almost like,
It's almost a little ridiculous here.
I mean, if somebody buys a $600,000 house, what do they need for a down payment? Was 10%, 20%?
Well, you can put less, but it's standard, it's usually 10, 20%.
Even at 10, that would be $60,000. We could give people 10.
Well, there are.
That's the median price, though. Half the prices are, half the assessments anywhere below that. So maybe. I think that we're talking about down payment assistance.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time hearing. With down payment assistance, Lennox has had luck in Lennoxdale because the prices are relatively low in the properties. Great Barrington has had almost no success because of the higher prices in South County. I think that I would suggest that if we're going to look at down payment assistance, before we get too far into it, we really should sit down and talk with someone on the Great Barrington Affordable Housing Trust Fund and see how realistic it turned out their down payment assistance program was.
Right, there's all, there
I think
are
we're much closer to Great Barrington than Lennoxdale. Sorry, Liz.
also other avenues. I happened to have somebody come to speak at Pinewoods last week or the week before, maybe last week. His name is Jamie Pollard. He works for Academy Mortgage, and he's the guy who works with people who say, I want to buy a house, but. And he said, I have a way to help you get at least your credit together and then figure out how you can get it. And he had different strategies and different ways to get money, some with no money down. So it was really fascinating, and I wish I could remember everything, but I gave my sheet to somebody there of all the notes that I took. But Jamie I'm sure he would come speak to us about this. It's really, there are possibilities, but somebody I know, who actually I saw today, said, it was really good. He's gonna help me set up, figure out how to up my credit, and I wanna buy a house, and we're gonna do it. So, and this is somebody from Pinewoods who never thought it would be possible, and it's probably not gonna be possible in Stockbridge, but it will be possible someday. He's willing to help, because Jamie comes from Stockbridge and Lee area, and he grew up with nothing, and he really tries to take care of all the people that he understands, as well as others, but it was terrific.
What's his name?
Jamie Pollard,
P.O.
Lillard.
Well, shall we put him on the agenda if he would come talk to us?
Yep.
Let's get terrific. I mean, are there properties in Glendale?
Not so much anymore.
It's very discouraging what's happened to.
Well, there's really nothing out there right now for sale. I mean, there's very little. And it goes on the market. If it's priced well, it's gone in days. So,
And then people, if it's priced well, that means that it's priced to have everybody bid it up.
not necessarily. It might just be that it's not worth that much, but it's gonna be a fixer-upper, and somebody who's buying a fixer-upper with hardly any money isn't gonna have the money to fix it up. So, it's a.
So we can take over on that.
Yeah.
Sit and talk to him and see if he's willing to come. I also, Patrick and I went and met with the tenants, a small group of the tenants at Pinewoods, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And something we all hear from Joanna, which, by the way, Joanna won. If we don't know, she's now on the Parks and Recs group. But I happened to be looking in Facebook Marketplace, and I don't know if it's real or not, but there was, for $2,000, there was this quite spectacular playground equipment. And one of the projects I thought I'd like to just bring up for your thoughts is, could we use, and Patrick, maybe you can help, but could we use we have some money, and $2,000 to get the equipment, and then probably another couple of $1,000s to get it installed. Say the total package was $5,000. Would that be something, Patrick, we could do at Pinewoods?
I think you're the chair. You can reach out to town council and ask. I think Pinewoods was created with CPC money, so we have more flexibility there for things. Obviously, there's two steps. One, you have to get permission from Construct, and two, you'd have to get advice from town council on whether funding the playground is a allowed use for CPC money. Now, separately, we could ask, because we've got several tens of thousands of dollars more from the housing production plan allotment, which was 50, and it's my understanding the consultant's much less than that. We could also ask the select board if they would allow us to redeploy some of that money for a purpose like this, which maybe we'd have more options on. So those are two paths to getting that done if Construct approves it. Because obviously we can't do anything if they won't.
Right. And I need to find out if this equipment really costs $2,000 because
I would have to say, I'd rather spend 10 and buy new equipment and have it installed professionally rather than kind of, used stuff worries me a little bit, but if someone's gonna evaluate it, I guess that's fine, but,
It's not, this particular thing isn't used, it's new. Because not
Oh.
everything on Facebook Marketplace is used. But something that's that cheap, when you actually, it's in New York City, which is another weird thing. But it does say who made it, and so I thought, oh, maybe I can do a little research and find out where, we don't have to have this particular piece of playground equipment, but the picture was fabulous. It had, slides and climbing and swings and all kinds of wonderful things.
Ferris wheel?
Pardon?
Ferris wheel? No?
No, Patrick, I'm sorry.
I
it
wanna
did
put in
not
a
have
Ferris wheel.
No,
No?
it did have a little, a treehouse looking thing.
Ah.
I guess, is that something that interests, I guess I'm gonna take this home. I'm not the playground queen here. But,
Liz, you're the Pine Woods rep, right? The Pine Woods liaison?
Liz,
I would start with just, Liz should call Kathy or June and just take the temperature of whether this is something they'd be interested in.
Okay.
It's their decision first and foremost. If we can figure out a way to do it, would they be interested?
Okay.
terrific. Thank you, Liz, for volunteering.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Okay, future projects, one more idea, which really came from an email from Bruce, which you alluded to, is this idea of, and we all have heard about Windflower?
Yes.
Down in Great Barrington that Construct's doing. And we don't know anything about it, and I did reach out to Mary Beth. But in Lenox, on 7, across from the Toyota, is an out of business or inactive motel.
Oh.
And one other thought was, what about joint venturing with the Lenox Trust and not trying to do government subsidized things, which gets a nightmare. But see if we could get, if we could get long-term leases with places like Red Lion Inn, the cultural institutions that all need summer help, and see if we could develop that motel. We don't even know if it's for sale, but as a concept, if it were, and then we shared these Lenox and Stockbridge both benefit from the cultural institutions but if the numbers can work, and we could create a common room as well as, I think it's not very big, but it's maybe 15 people.
And this would be for people that are coming to perform or work at the cultural institutions?
Right.
And then there'd be some rent paid to help underwrite the cost, or?
Right, they would sign a lease to rent the rooms, because they do this. Now, I don't know about Red Lion, I have talked to Sarah Eustace, and she was very, very interested in what we're doing, and they have a tremendous team. And restaurants do too. Now, I don't know whether restaurants are wealthy enough to pay for housing. Probably not, but if we could find enough leases, enough people, that also, I think would meet our needs. It would not be a Pine Woods kind of thing with Section 8, but would be funded by the businesses.
So we're asking to lease from the owner this space? Because who's gonna own this, say it's that motel, who's gonna own the motel?
Probably a new entity. Not us.
Right. I think that we've got a couple of relatively small scale projects. I want to just tell you about what happened at Heaton Court last week and to talk about the playground. But I really think that the focus of the large project right now is the housing production plan. And this is going to take up more time, not less time, over the next 2 or 3 months. And it's going to be in the analysis, pulling the plan together, presenting it. I think that we're jumping to the second part on a major initiative before we kind of do the planning around the first part. And I would suggest that we try to kind of provide whatever help and assistance we can. while, staying in touch with Construct about whether there's a need for any of the resources we do have on an emergency basis with the money that we do have, and kind of, see what comes out of our planning process so that we know how we should prioritize our time. Because we're only going to have enough bandwidth for one or two major initiatives at a time, if it maybe even just one. It sounds great. Unfortunately, the scale of need is vastly more than what we either have time or resources to address. And I think that prioritization should come out of the housing production plan.
I'm sure we all agree to support that, but to support the planning part, and we hope there'll be some very positive things that come out of it. But it takes a long time to put these projects together, and getting our toe in the water, I guess, I'm a little more, I've got my development hat on. The needs are so great, Patrick, that if we keep saying, well, we have to wait till this, and we have to wait for that, we'll never get anything new here. So I'd be very much in favor of at least sticking our toe out, if not our fingers, and see if any of these ideas have any merit.
I guess my only comment on that is, reinvesting in Pine Woods, potential expansion of Heaton Court, looking at the Levan property. What do we do with that gas station we're going to own next year? Right by BTG. Are there opportunities with any tax title properties with Habitat for Humanity? That's 5 in Stockbridge projects I just rattled off, and we are going to be lucky if we do 1 or 2 of them. And I don't know what the right answers are, and we haven't even done our first kind of planning process and to think about. Look, if the board wants to, prioritize partnering with the surrounding communities and doing a regional project, that's great. But I just think we're going to have to plan to do that based on a realistic assessment of where we are. I don't know. It's up to you guys.
Planning is always a good thing, and there's probably been there hasn't been enough of it here. None of my ideas or comments are directed at not supporting the housing production project and the survey work. And I think the most important thing is the outreach that we're going to try to do. I'm a little disappointed that it's only 2 meetings that we're going to have to really talk to the community about these issues, because as we all know, they're large and complex, and there are a lot of people in town that sort of, we have a lot of NIMBY thinking in our town. And it will get uncovered, I suspect, in the survey.
Okay. And if you need to add a 3rd community meeting, just negotiate whatever the fee is from the consultant and add a 3rd one. We have it in the budget for the housing production plan.
Okay. You mentioned something at Heaton Court.
Yeah.
What?
So they wanted, the folks up there wanted to expand their community room with a smart TV, 65-inch smart TV, and a Netflix subscription, and we were able to fund that through a very generous couple that started out as second homeowners and became primary homeowners, and they wrote a check to privately fund the initiative last week, which is fantastic. So I just wanted to I had no information to name them, so I won't, but I wanted to thank them. They know they are, and just point out that there's often opportunities to do these small projects with, we're such a generous community at so many levels, and this is just an example of that.
That's terrific.
That is terrific.
Wonderful, Patrick. Likewise, I think this playground, it really is. A third of the children in our community live at Pine Woods, and
20%, yes.
And that playground equipment is really, not to mention the problems there, but the playground equipment is in tough shape.
I think that's a good one to get behind. It's sort of a discrete and manageable project if we have the money to do it and we're allowed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
it shows a real good faith effort to help Pine Woods in the limited way that we can. I suspect that playground equipment is more, a decent thing is gonna be more than a couple $1,000, I guess. But even if you have a $10,000 budget for
We should be able to
getting
get
the
some.
stuff and getting it installed, it could also be installed by volunteers. I was part of a school playground thing, and we just,
We did it here, but I think our playground at one point was a volunteer.
there's a lot of handy
There's a lot
people,
of,
a lot of handy people in town that feel good about doing something like that, so it's something to consider. If we're allowed, if our funds are not restricted, and we can do this. I think it's a kind of a neat targeted thing to get some points on the board and accomplish something.
Terrific. All right, playground matron here will, see what we can do. Thank you for that vote of support. We can. But I think there are lots of stories. When we lived on Cape Cod, my husband designed a playground for handicapped children, and the community built it. It was, and it's there today. It was a long time ago.
That's wonderful.
So, who would like, both Carol Valley from Habitat and Carol Bauman from CDC have expressed interest in coming to talk to us, to expand our knowledge.
I might suggest that with Carolyn Valley, because the opportunity at Habitat is both volunteering as well as building housing, I think we should partner with Wendy Pearson in the Stockbridge Library and actually host her for a public forum at the library rather than, just come into a board meeting like we've done with the other people. And I think if that's the one we got this summer, that would be good. The housing production plan is going to take up a lot of our time, and we didn't have a speaker today, and it's already 6:45. So I think if we could kind of schedule something with Carolyn, in Habitat, and kind of promote it through the library speaker series, that would be really awesome. And then we maybe hold off on other speakers until the fall once we've got the housing production plan under. I would be completely out of energy if we'd added 45 minutes for a speaker tonight.
So I kind of agree with you, Patrick, that I think particularly for the next 2 or even maybe 3 meetings, it's gonna be a lot of housing production plan discussion, learning about it, debating what.
Carolyn over the summer would be fantastic to get at the library, and we could be, co-manage that or co-present it with the library. And that might be a way to reach out to the community on our part too.
Right, yeah, and get them to know us and that they can always come to our meetings.
So when I was dealing with Carol Valley, a while ago, the housing, she couldn't make it at the last minute. She had to be away or something. So I think she would like to make good on that. And also I do volunteer work at the library, and I went very well, and I can pull that together.
So Mark has volunteered.
I have
to be in charge.
volunteered.
Another spectacular, are we gonna